Ron Hosko is a former assistant director of the FBI. He is in our Washington bureau. So, Ron, explain what would have happened to us as we talk more about the background of Omar Mateen. What would have happened when the FBI closed its investigation into Mateen? Would his name come up in any kind of gun purchase flags or procedures?
It really would not, Elaine. When the FBI goes through its investigative process in a case that relates to a criminal matter or conspiracy or the threat of a federal crime or a national security threat, there are very clear provisions, and one of those is as the investigation concludes, and there are timetables for preliminary investigations as well as what's known as an assessment, which is the lowest level. There are timetables to conclude those. That is all in the Attorney General guidelines that really form what the FBI can do and what they cannot do. And so there is no real electronic leash or tripwire to these cases, so that if the FBI concludes today that you do not pose a threat, and they do that fairly, these are human decisions, not made by a machine. They close that case today because there is no threat. And you change tomorrow. You bump into someone who radicalizes you, you read something on the internet, and you change tomorrow or next week. There is nothing that alerts the FBI that something just changed. And I think that is a space for a good conversation about those guidelines and about what we expect of the FBI.
So it was interesting, Ron, to hear FBI Director James Comey didn't want to discuss whether Mateen had encrypted data on any of his devices, but our Jeff Pegues has reported that encryption does not appear to be an issue in this particular case for Omar Mateen. That being said, what Jeff has told us is that he very much had a presence on social media, Omar Mateen did. What would be the first steps, essentially, as authorities try to pull together all of those kinds of informational strands?
Well, they will go look to the devices that he possessed in the nightclub, that he worked with or touched back home. They will be serving paper on internet security or internet providers to get content information, to get what his browsing history was, and to try to replicate that browsing history, to look at emails, whatever's has been saved, and try to engage with whoever were among his friends and his contacts to understand what his network looked like and what was interesting to him, what was driving him, how did it change from 6 months ago, perhaps a year ago, to last week. Something obviously changed in this man's background, and so the FBI wants to create that very robust picture to understand what drove him to this point. Was it a single actor? Was it someone overseas, or was it just him sitting on the internet looking at information that was interesting to him and pulled him in?
Ron, it was interesting to hear the details from Police Chief John Mina there, who was talking to our Scott Pelley about how it was the attack unfolded and how it was that the police operation unfolded. And now we have a little bit more clarity on what was taking place in those 3 hours from the time that the shots first rang out to the time that police actually decided to go into the nightclub. Based on what we know at this point, Ron, what do you make of the police response to this, given the fact that, as Scott noted, there was at one point a bluff on the part of Mateen that he was saying he was going to put these explosive vests, which never existed, but he was threatening to do that and put those on some of the hostages. What do you make of how the police handled this situation?
Well, first, as a former SWAT guy myself, I salute amazing heroism by these officers who went into that breach, who are going to face down this gunfire. This is something that we all train for, and we all dread the call that it is going on right now, because you very well may not go home from this sort of an encounter. The goal of the tactical team and those around them, including negotiators, the on-scene commanders, behavioralists, if you can plug them in, intelligence collectors, is to understand what's going on inside that space, so that you make a good judgments about the threat inside and the threat to you. You don't want to run headlong into something that is going to cut down the entire SWAT team. And when you introduce discussions about explosives, that is something the negotiators are going to take seriously. They're going to relate to the tactical people so that you can make the best decisions. And now it could be the explosives, if there are some, are placed by the obvious entry points. And so the SWAT team, as they did here, are going to look for alternate breach points to maybe go in, to surprise, and to take advantage of speed and surprise and win this battle that is coming their way. So I think I will be the last to second guess the timetable here, because what we don't want to do is have a SWAT team go in and have that 12-man team or 11-man team be the next bodies that are taken out of that place.
All right, Ron Hosko in Washington for us. Ron, thank you so much for your insight.
My pleasure.